Welcome to the Ask JT podcast, where we simplify tax, finance, and business decisions for UK business owners. I'm Justin Turner, an accountant, business owner, and author. I'm going to share practical advice and help you run your business more efficiently and keep more of what you earn. Hi everyone, I'm Justin Turner. I'm joined today by Dave Rogers, who's going to provide a really interesting part to our talk today, which is going to be about growing your business in a digital age. I'm going to pass on to Dave and he can introduce himself and tell us all a little bit about himself.
Cheers, Justin. It's great to be joining you this morning. So I'm Dave Rogers, and for around the last 30 years, I've been helping businesses and leaders understand the commercial impact of the decisions they're making and how it can help them thrive and innovate and continue to grow their businesses through whatever challenges they face. So I'm looking forward to discussing a few interesting points today.
Great. I think let's delve into everything, I suppose. And I think technology is, it's a hot topic. It's been a hot topic for a number of years, and the advent of AI, the marketplace is changing. And I think businesses are maybe struggling just to keep up a little bit. I've got a technology background, so I think I'm sort of cutting edge in some respects in some of the technology I've put into my own business. But I just wondered from your perspective, if you had an example of where a business has maybe delayed putting in technology and it's been really costly to them.
Yeah, I think, certainly during my time in the hospitality industry, I've spent a lot of time working there. And I think sort of in some respects, they were a little bit later in some regards, embracing some of the technology. But then as soon as you realise what it's capable of, they then realise the importance of it. And I think what that then ends up happening is you create a situation where you're having to find the capital to invest in it because you haven't embraced it as early as you possibly could have done, or maybe in some cases should have done.
What do you think the resistance is with technology?
Yeah, I think there's potentially two resistances. Like you, I'm from a relatively tech background, so I'm sort of happy to trial stuff and embrace stuff. So I do think there's an element of lack of understanding, lack of worry, but then not understanding there's experts out there who can help people do it. And then I also think there's an immediate belief that this is going to be incredibly costly for an organisation. And I think, just going back to the first point you just made, is that actually if you invest in it from an early sort of startup point of view, actually the incremental costs of developing that technology actually become less than if you leave it for too long and end up having to play catch up. And I think there's a lot of, as you said, with the invention of AI, with the developments in technology and the technology, record this sort of conversation, there's stuff that's relatively easy to obtain, relatively cost effective as well, and also easy to pick up because it's relatively intuitive now in terms of how it can help you understand what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think from my own perspective, looking back to when we went into the COVID lockdown, my business was ideally positioned because we'd invested in that technology infrastructure. So when a lot of companies were scrapping around going, how do we do video calls and how do we make video recordings on YouTube? We already had all that infrastructure in place. So we were using technologies like Slack and Google Meet and, all of that was in place. And I think it's sometimes you can't take advantage of opportunities until you've laid the foundations, and it's worth definitely investigating in it. But yeah, that was a very interesting insight. But I think just to move it on, I suppose, a little bit is, what about creativity and collaboration for businesses? Do you think there's advantages when we bring in all this technology? Is it going to stifle creativity or is it going to sort of enhance it?
Yeah, again, a really interesting topic of conversation. I think for me, again, there's two sides to this. I think what it allows us to do is make the world to be more interconnected than it's ever been before. So again, using some examples from my own sort of business, I'm lucky enough to work with clients on a number of quite interesting collaborative projects, not only with the client themselves, but with their potential software partners and things like that. But that means we're able to create people that are from all over the world working on this project. And without using the technology, we just simply wouldn't be able to do that. I can remember, unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember the good old days of when you'd be shipping tech partners in their 10s and 20s into corporate businesses to integrate a new HR system or a new finance system or build it. Whereas now we can do that remotely and create more space for solutions to the challenges that we've all got in our own businesses, worldwide. But I think the flip side to that is, and again, this might be speaking from my numerous years working in hospitality, which is, really is a people business, is you can't actually beat getting people around a table sometimes. But I think what the technology allows us to do is facilitate where actually we can still get people together in an office environment within a larger organisation, or whether it be in a, smaller office share type environment, but be able to bring people in using the technology who can't actually make it. So it's a really interesting debate around whether it stifles it or enhances it. I think for me, there's balances with everything.
I mean, from my own perspective with collaboration, and we resisted practice management software for numerous years because it was so large and complicated. And it was about 14 months ago we brought it in place. And it was a case of, actually this revolutionized our entire world, and I've just been attacked by a cat.
But the joys of broadcasting.
The joys of broadcasting. But no, but one of the things we find is, now when a client emails, it's automatically identified and appended to that client's file, or even the work that's ongoing. And you can very easily cross teams, I can see everything my team has been saying to that client, and then we can have internal conversations, we can project manage our work, we can even send checklists out to the client asking for information. From a collaborative point of view, it's both client and internal working. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
And I think just if I could just jump in again there, just it's really, again, another one of my clients who I'm working with as an associate business coach, effectively helping their franchisees build their businesses. We've got, they've got that business set up along similar lines. So it means that actually, although I only probably interact with the franchisee once a month during a coaching conversation, I'm part of that environment that allows me to be able to see all of the outside of those sort of monthly meetings that I have with them, so that then actually I can bring that insight to the conversation as well, and just improves that whole experience for everybody.
Yeah, sure. That's a very interesting insight. One of the things I just want to touch on with creativity and technology is, have you played with the OpenAI, the DALL-E system for generating images?
I have. I've also tried a couple of other AI. So Leonardo AI is what I've tried, and also there's one called Midjourney as well. And I think it's fair to say my experience has been mixed. Is probably what I would say. I think you've got to be very, or in my experience, I think you've got to be very prescriptive about what you want to enable it to create it. I think quite rightly there's been nervousness from the creative world around sort of how AI is developing this, but I do think there's an element of use for it, and some of my social media posts do utilize AI generated images. I've tried to make sure that I share that, that people know that's that's what I've done, because I think that's only fair and equitable. If I'm using somebody's stock photo, I always make sure that, I provide the credit, and likewise, I think it's important to share that. But as I said, more development required in that world of AI than perhaps there is in the text and video world, I would say, from the image generation point of view.
That's interesting. I was just curious to know what your thoughts were on that. That was all, because I've been playing around with it a little bit, which is, I mean, it's just incredible, really, to be able to click a button and produce this stuff. So, yeah.
That's it.
Just sort of, again, moving the conversation on a little bit, there's these sort of challenges with technology, I suppose, that create sort of communication problems, I suppose. And I think one of the kind of big barriers in terms of technology is getting people to adopt it. Have you got any killer solutions for those sorts of problems?
Yeah, well, I think from an adoption point of view, I think, as we said earlier, I think it just goes back to that, actually people trying to find more information about it. And I think in the world of technology, there's so much information at our fingertips. And actually, there's so many, as I'm sure you've experienced, there's so many software products now that allow you to have a free trial of what they do and what they can show you what to do. And I think there's a number of points where you're able to create things with a free version of something and go, oh, actually, I can see how this works. And I feel a little bit more comfortable about then embracing it in my own in my own business. For me, one of those tools that I've now started exploring and use a little bit more regularly is Zapier, and using that as a link to two different sets of software that wouldn't ordinarily talk to each other to enable you to do some relatively straightforward things that just free people's time up to do more strategic planning on moving their businesses forward as well. So I think that's probably the thing for me. I try the free stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Zapier is game changing. I mean, and I think most months we automate something like 4 tasks in a month. It's just moving data. And I think one of the challenges we've got is there's so much bits of technology. So we use a piece of technology to produce proposals for clients. That then talks to our accounting software, but it kind of talks, but doesn't properly talk to our practice management software. So we use Zapier to move all of this data around the place and everything like that. I mean, it's just absolutely, it is really game changing. I think one of the insights that I've got with technology though, with teams, we use so much technology as the team members can become overwhelmed by the technology. And I think it's, it is wonderful, but you've got to drip feed the information and not give them everything all at once. And you need a strategy to deal with that. But anyway, that's very interesting insights again. So what about kind of the last point of our sort of quick chat today about tech is, what about balancing technology with humans? At the end of the day, we've got technology's great, and this is a hot topic of mine, by the way, because you've got to get this bit right, in my opinion. And I think most companies have got it wrong. I'd like to think my company has mostly got it right, where I think we're forgetting about humans. We're trying to get the technology to do everything, and we're forgetting we're in business to support other people. At the end of the day, people want to deal with people, not with technology. So how do we get this balance right? What are your thoughts?
Again, this is just a really interesting challenge, I think, full stop. I think, and just touching back on AI for a second, you think about things like, the majority of websites have now got chatbots as an example that, that you're interacting with, trying to address your concerns. And whilst I get the point about it's efficient, there'll be a set of frequently asked questions, as it were, that sit behind, in the data that allows that technology to help the individual. Ultimately, particularly around customer service, is, that's all about relationships and be able to understand quickly what that customer's, particularly their challenge, if they've got a problem is, or if they're actually providing some fantastic feedback for you. I think for me, it's really important to build, people. However, I think what businesses sometimes forget is they see technology as a cost saving tool. And whilst it is to a certain extent in that specific task you're trying to, as we've just discussed, automate, actually what you should be then thinking about, well, actually, if there is the potential for somebody, and there will be, and there has within an organisation because of something you're bringing in for technology, how can you then utilise those individuals elsewhere in your business to help enhance your customer service? So a great example of that for me is, when I go shopping to Sainsbury's every week, 20 years ago, it used to be there was maybe 10 people on the tills, and you were queuing up at the till, and you were chatting to people. They were scanning your food through, etc., etc. Roll on 20 years, and we've now got home delivery, self-scan, smart shopping in the case of Sainsbury's, where the technology has allowed the customer to be in more control of their shopping experience in some regards.
Yeah.
But what it doesn't look like the supermarkets have done, quite rightly, is gone, okay, so that means we don't need these people in our business, because actually what they've done is they've redeployed themselves. So the 10 people that used to be on the tills at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning are now actually helping pick the deliveries that are being sent to people's homes, because technology has allowed that freedom for people to do something else. And I think that's the bit for me about balancing the human elements, is that it's not just about the customer service, it's about your team and how you're integrating your team with technology and personal touch points. And in some instances, you'll see brands like, so a great example, I watched an interview with Ben Francis from Gymshark yesterday. Now, Gymshark is a multi-million, if not, nearly £1 billion turnover business now. they've got they've got one store that people can go into in London to buy their kit. Everything they do is online. However, their customer service and their human touch is all driven through events that they do and through their social media and adopting technology and creating that feeling of being part of a family in regards, or community is probably a better word, like it would have been, way back when, it was a very community sort of, and big cities used to operate.
And I think it's very interesting. I think one of my kind of, I suppose, bugbears is companies, what they're using technology for is to move the time requirement from them doing it onto the consumer or the customer, the client.
Yeah.
And to me, that is a huge mistake. And I think it's also because it's very easy on a form, for example, because we've technology, we'll add a few more questions to that form.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there was something that came through from the valuation office agency. And I remember it used to be a paper form and it would take me maybe 20 minutes to fill the paper form in. But now they've expanded the questions that they're asking because it's so easy for them to add more stuff. But I think the mistake we're making, or a lot of businesses are making, is we're not realizing the time it's costing other people and it's making everything so much more inefficient when technology should be making us more efficient. And I think that's where I've had a big focus in my own business is the technology has to be able to move data from one place to another, make it better to communicate. So when someone accepts a proposal, everyone in my team sent a message saying, Dave has accepted a new proposal. Here's the link to the proposal. And it gets rid of that thing where, you pick up the phone and people are going, who are you, Dave? Who are you? They're really smart uses of technology. But I think we need to think really carefully about, how many questions do we put on a form? How much time is it costing? And I think one of the bits of technology that is sweeping firms of solicitors and accountants is this anti-money laundering software, where it's all becoming app-based, where people have got to take pictures of themselves, scan their ID. And do you know what? It ticks all sorts of legislation boxes. And someone in my team said, could we do this? It takes us so long to do the anti-money laundering. And I said, but all we're doing is switching our time onto the client, and the client isn't so au fait with the technology in this area. So we're basically we're moving half an hour of our time onto the client. And I was just and I'm absolutely adamant. I think, it's one of those technological changes that will almost be forced into because of the way the legislation is evolving, basically, that in order to hit the points.
Yeah. Sorry, and I think that's a really interesting point because I do think there's a lot here that is driven by legislation because they automatically go, well, we can do more because the technology can allow us to capture more, as you quite rightly point out. But for me, there's also a bit around, but what are you then doing with all of this additional data?
Yes.
Because if you're not using it to provide insight, to create a better customer experience, then why are you capturing the data? If it's just to tick a box, then I'm not quite sure that's the right place to go. And I think also the fact that technology is also changing so quickly and so fast now, there's already the ability to, for you or I to record, probably 15, 20 seconds of our voice, take a few photos of ourselves, and AI can create presentations using what sounds like us delivering it. So, you think about if that's in the world now, where are we going to be in 12 months time, 5 years time? Because it's progressing so rapidly that if we're not careful, as you say, we're going to overload people with, worry and stress about being able to complete all of this new technological data gathering without giving them any or help or guidance, because all that's driven by is a chatbot on a website.
Yeah.
So
I think just to wrap up for today's conversation, I wanted to give one last example, if I may, is one of our clients is a butcher shop in not a particularly affluent area. When I walk through the door of that butcher shop, they know me by name, and they should know me. I look after them, but they know everybody who walks, probably 80% of the people who walk through the door, they know everyone by name. They know a little bit about their lives, what's going on, understand your husband's been unwell. Is everything all right? Wonderful. They add up what you owe on the piece of paper which you wrapped your meat in.
Oh, brilliant.
Then it gets keyed into a very, very basic till. There's sawdust on the floor. There's no computers. There's no Wi-Fi. Yet one day when I went in there and I said, could I have a shoulder of lamb? He said, hang on a minute. He went to the freezer. He opens the freezer and he pulls out this package and wrapped in the paper, and it said Justin written on the side of the paper. And he managed that without a CRM system. And I just think, it's a wonderful example of probably the gold standard of customer service, of that you can do it without technology. And I think hidden behind the scenes, we've automated a lot of his accountancy processes using AI to scan in purchase invoices, but he doesn't interact with it at all. Not interested. He just wants the piece of paper, and he wants a piece of paper, and he doesn't want an email with his profit and loss and his balance sheet on there. But I just think it's such a nice approach and so rarely seen. Despite that business being in a not particularly affluent area, Saturday morning there was a queue of people out of the door, and I think it's an illustration, you can get things right without the tech.
Yeah, and I think it's great to, with those sorts of stories as well, sharing that actually, to me, that goes back to an earlier point around, the community feel of, sort of a business. And that just shows you that that's still live, and breathing really well. There'll be numerous, butchers, bakers, local shops, whatever it might be, hardware stores that are in villages, but we've got one in our village as well. And you get queues out of the door because one, they deliver great quality products, and two, they're delivering fantastic service, and three, they know everybody. So it's just great, and it's just how, as you say, how do bigger businesses still adopt that philosophy, I suppose, with the technology that they're adopting.
It's been a really interesting conversation with you today, Dave, and I hope everyone else is going to enjoy it. You've written a book, haven't you, Dave? Tell us just very quickly about your book before we finish off.
So I've wrote a book. It was actually about mental health and well-being, because I think that's hugely important in the world of business as well. It's called Fueled, Fit and Fired Up. It's available on Amazon. It just helps people just understand a little bit more about some real practical hints and tips that they can do just to help, as the strapline on the book says, unleash the power of a healthy life, really. So yeah, it's available on Amazon. And interestingly, I'm in the midst of writing another book at the moment around business. So yeah, feel free to look out for a little bit more information about that. So okay.
Best of luck with the new book anyway. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Cheers now. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Ask JT podcast. Subscribe for a weekly episode, and if you found this useful, share it with a fellow business owner who might benefit.